She thinks she can fly just because she memorized the training manual. Can't blame her. Everyone wants to play pilot until they meet a 40-knot headwind. The sky over the white sands of Arizona that day was crystal clear, like glass. No clouds, no noise, no applause, no teammates cheering. Only the thud of combat boots striking, cracked concrete, and the grinding wheels of a jet being towed to the runway. Megan Reese, 26, wearing a sand-colored flight suit with a cadet badge, walked toward the F-16 simulator cockpit. No one was waiting for her there. The instructor remained silent. The others just stood in the back, clustered together, with half smiles, half sneers in their eyes. She was the last remaining female cadet in the Phantom 9 class, a pre-combat training program at Andrews Air Force Base. 14 started, 13 were men. After 8 months, she was the only one who hadn't yet flown a Level 3 simulation, not because of a lack of skill, but because no one wanted to risk the mission by letting her fly. She drew a deep breath, her chest rising under the thick flight suit. In her ears, the words of Captain Travers echoed the man who once tore up her registration form and slammed it against the checklist board. "You're a decent co-pilot. Don't dream of the front seat. This is the Air Force, not some stage for proving girl power." She didn't argue, didn't talk back, just bowed her head and kept studying. Every night, she replayed simulation footage, traced every flight path, memorized every reflex, every command code. There were nights she fell asleep on the simulator floor. Once she was caught wiping her helmet visor with her own handkerchief. No one noticed. No one cared. But Megan was always there, persistent, quiet, just like her father once taught her. Megan's father, Colonel Robert Reese, was a legendary pilot in the Pacific Air Force, reported missing during a covert mission when Megan was just 10. Nobody, no funeral, just a black and white photo and an old insignia she kept in the chest pocket of her suit. "Dad never got to say goodbye to the skies, so I'll fly for him." That vow she never told anyone, but it burned in every step she took, in every test she passed, and in every gaze she forced herself to endure. Today's flight was a high-speed strike simulation under jet stream resistance, usually reserved for top-tier cadets. Megan was never supposed to be on that list. But this morning, one cadet injured his shoulder and had to withdraw. She was called up not because of her skill, but because no one else was free. The simulator door sealed shut. The wraparound screen lit up, projecting a night sky over the borderlands. The engine roared. Data flooded the dashboard. Outside, everyone waited. None of them believed she would make it. But she had practiced this mission for over 200 hours, in silence, in darkness. No one verified it, but she remembered every crosswind, every sonic threshold. Her hand gripped the stick, her eyes locked onto the coordinates. 3, 2, 1. She flew. The simulated F-16 launched into the virtual sky, diving into turbulence. The simulator jolted violently. Speed increased. Pressure pulled back. Her feet locked into the pedal's jaw, clenched tight. Outside, the chief instructor stared at the monitor. The numbers, which they fully expected to turn red with error by the second turn, remained calmly green. "She's..." Holding Altitude 1 trainer muttered. A few others stepped closer to the screen. Stable speed, precise trajectory, spiral maneuver in loop 4. The hardest technique executed flawlessly. 10 minutes. No errors. No missed targets. No threshold breaches. Not a single misstep. And then, Megan landed within the simulated terrain. Smoothly. No collision. Silence. No one spoke. Only the sound of her chair unlocking as the simulator opened. She removed her helmet and stepped out, her hair damp with sweat. Eyes forward, no bowed head, no need for validation. Just, for the first time in her life, she had flown. She didn't blow it. No, she passed everything. Megan Reese, the first cadet to pass level 3 on her first official flight. But Megan didn't hear them. She had heard enough dismissals in her life. Today, she didn't need words. The sky, at last, belonged to her. She flew once, and now she thinks she's a real pilot. No one congratulated her. No one reached out for a handshake. There wasn't a single friendly glance, only silence, and coldness so sharp she could feel even the desert morning breeze seemed kinder by comparison. After her successful simulation flight, Megan thought she would finally be treated more fairly. But she was wrong, very wrong. Her victory didn't earn admiration. It made people feel threatened. The next day, on the training assignment board, her name was moved from the primary flight tactics group to the ground support section, a silent demotion. While other cadets were sent to the field to practice combat formations, she was assigned to inspect maintenance protocols on training aircraft models. It's just part of the regular rotation. Lieutenant Crowley shrugged with a thin smile when she asked, but that rotation only seemed to apply to her. Male cadets who made technical mistakes still got to fly. Megan did not. The maintenance zone was the dirtiest, hottest, and had no air conditioning. Each morning she stood among metal frames, hands covered in grease, wiping down simulator systems that other cadets had accidentally broken. She kept working quietly without complaint, but the whispering never stopped. "C told you, one good flight doesn't make her a fighter. Stick to tech work, sweetheart. That's where you belong. I swear, if they ever let her on a real mission, I'm dropping out of the academy." One time, she returned to her room and found a clean slash down the back of her flight suit. On her desk, someone had left a disposable pilot glove with the words scrawled in marker for co-pilots. She didn't cry. She didn't report it. She simply folded the ripped uniform into her locker, put on an older one, and continued showing up to class at 4:30 a.m., earlier than anyone else. She sat in the far back corner, taking notes on everything. Every theory module, every regulation, every emergency maneuver for mid-air malfunctions. Because she knew if she ever got a second chance, no one would be there to save her but herself. One afternoon, during a tactical simulation class, the instructor played a sample flight for error analysis, but the clip shown was from Megan's training session the previous week. At first, it seemed like a learning opportunity, but the audio had been doctored into a parody, and the voiceover came from the male cadets in her class. "Check it out, flying like a queen, landing like a princess. Welcome to Megan's YouTube channel, America's favorite entertainment pilot." The classroom burst into laughter. The instructor said nothing. She just sat still, eyes fixed on the screen. Not because she was embarrassed, but in the top left corner of the data panel, she saw her father's gaze in those numbers. That was the only proof she needed that she had flown correctly. That night, she walked to the old training field, the abandoned drone aircraft range. She sat alone in the darkness, opened her logbook, and replayed the simulation flight in her mind. Every turn, every angle, every deceleration sequence. No one saw, no one needed to, but she wasn't training to prove anything to them. She trained so that she would never make a mistake, not even once. At Andrews Base, where everything was measured by rank and results, she was invisible. But a phantom in the sky is always silent before it strikes, and that day was drawing near. There are battles that begin long before takeoff. Andrews Base, Day 53 of the Phantom 9 program. Weather scorching sun, 42 degrees Celsius. Mood still as steel. The training sergeant made the announcement, "This afternoon, Level 4, Complex Tactical Simulation, First Open Evaluation. Full team participation in pairs 2 per group. All results will be recorded and reviewed live by the senior training officer." The room fell completely silent. Megan glanced at the pairing board. Reese, Henderson cadet, Kyle Henderson, son of an Air Force colonel, top cadet in the class, and the one who had once told her flatly, "I don't fly with you. I don't fly with risk." This time, Megan didn't object. She simply nodded her eyes, steady and unflinching. That afternoon in the tactical simulation chamber, their team was assigned a simulated mission to intercept and engage in hostile airspace, requiring speed coordination, radar evasion, and mock fire coordination in jamming conditions. A highly difficult test, but not impossible, if everything functioned as designed. But it didn't. By the third minute, Megan noticed strange distortions in her display lag, increasing virtual radar, failing to register target altitude correctly. She spoke to Henderson through the internal comms, "The system's lagging. Do you see Object 2's altitude shifting weirdly?" No response. She repeated louder this time, "Kyle, is someone tampering with the sim?" Still silence. Yet Henderson's headset indicator remained lit. He was still connected. He heard her. He just chose not to answer. The mission continued. She tried to recalibrate manually every turn, every burst of speed, relying entirely on the instinct she had trained night after night. But the errors kept compounding. Until the screen flashed, "Target missed. Mission failure." The simulator door opened. A few soft chuckles rose from a group of cadets nearby. Lieutenant Crowley shook his head. "We figured, after your last run, you'd have the sense to step aside." Megan didn't react. She stood still. But this time, she knew something wasn't right. That evening, while the others gathered at the officers' gym, she quietly entered the tech archives. Using the limited access she had from the maintenance work they once gave her as a demotion, she reopened the simulator log from that afternoon. She checked her data stream had a regulated delay of 1.7 seconds, meaning her inputs never matched real time. The internal network was operational. The comm signal from Henderson had been blocked from his side. Not a malfunction, a deliberate act. She printed out the log. At midnight, she walked into the technical officer's office and placed the file on the desk. The night duty captain, young, startled, looked up. "Reese, what's going on?" She looked him in the eye. No trembling, no anger. "Sir, I was sabotaged during today's tactical sim. I have the evidence." The next morning, an internal inquiry began. Kyle Henderson was summoned. His face drained of color when the log file was displayed on the screen. He stammered, "It was just a prank. No one thought she'd take the flight that seriously." The entire training hall went dead silent. No one laughed. Because this was no longer a prank. It was sabotage of a military exercise, betrayal of a teammate, a cowardly assault on someone's honor. By the end of the day, a single line was posted on the notice board: Cadet Megan Reese, assigned lead seat, Tier 5 combat simulation, public flight evaluation 0900 this Friday. She was granted command. Solo, a real flight test, before the full training board, in front of everyone who had ever laughed at her. No one said sorry, no one offered praise. But Megan knew they would watch, and this time she wouldn't let them look away. When a woman is pushed to the wall, she doesn't step back. She takes off. Friday, 08:57 a.m. The Phantom Hall training ground was packed. Some had come to see a spectacle. Some came to ensure Reese would fail publicly. A few remained quiet, their eyes carrying a hint of real concern or curiosity. On the command podium stood Lieutenant Colonel Harris, head of combat training at Andrews Base. He had never shown favoritism, but allowing Megan to attempt a Tier 5 public simulation flight without a backup wingman was unprecedented. Megan Reese stepped out. Her brown hair tied back her flight suit, marked faintly with Reese PH9 beneath layers of sun-kissed dust. No special insignia, no teammates by her side. Only a folded hand-drawn tactical map was tucked inside her chest pocket. She walked straight to the Talon X Tactical Simulation Chamber, the base's most advanced unit, fully replicating the control space of an F-35 Lightning II in emergency combat conditions. A presiding officer read the mission, brief duration 28 minutes, objective infiltrate a restricted airspace zone, eliminate 3 radar stations, avoid detection, and complete a high-pressure loop sequence under headwind. All maneuvers will be recorded. No assistance, no rescue. Mission cannot be aborted. Megan nodded. Not a word. She entered the chamber. The door sealed shut. 9:00 a.m. The main screen lit up. The entire auditorium was patched into the live feed. Cadets, officers, advisors, tactical analysts, all present. She was the only cadet in her class to attempt this simulation. Not because they believed she deserved it, but because they thought this would break her for good. Phase 1. Infiltration. She kept speed below radar detection, dodged the simulated crosswinds. The lock-on warning flashed twice. She banked 17 degrees, shut off, jamming reflectors, and glided past the target as if she herself were the radar. This speed is pure muscle memory, one advisor whispered. Phase 2. Target elimination. Instead of diving in, Megan looped 360 degrees around the radar station using a self-calculated cross-vector algorithm, something other cadets mockingly called artistic loops. But the system read, target confirmed, eliminated. She's piloting like a test flight veteran. Phase 3. Evading pursuit. 3 enemy fighters were simulated behind her. She didn't dodge. She climbed, vertically reversed the gravity vector, and pulled a 63-degree angle, an extreme maneuver no cadet dared attempt due to the risk of blackout from simulated G-force. Hearts in the room skipped. The screen shook. Alarms blared like the pulse of a commander hammering his seat. And then the enemy radar lost her signal. She descended and landed safely. Total time 26 minutes 41 seconds. No errors, no red flags, no violations. The simulator door opened. Megan stepped out face damp with sweat, still clutching her worn folded map. The auditorium remained frozen. No one moved. No one spoke. Until Lieutenant Colonel Harris rose, he nodded once. Recorded. Evaluation, Alpha Tier. Classification, Advanced Tactical Excellence. Reese officially cleared for live combat flight training. Whispers stirred. A few officers exchanged glances. Some cadets looked down, because for the first time, no one could excuse their failure with "she's just a girl." After the simulation, she walked silently through the corridor. The same corridor where those who once laughed at her now stood. No one dared say a word, but she didn't need an apology, because she had just proved one thing: she didn't come here to be accepted. She came here to fly. There are tests that don't exist in the manual, and those who pass never needed an invitation. Day 71 of the Phantom 9 program. Red Sand Training Range, Arizona. The sky blazed. Dry wind whipped across rows of aircraft on the runway like fingers tapping metal. The scent of jet fuel, sand, and heat mixed into something only pilots knew, almost addictive. Today was the final test. The Kill Zone Simulation, Desert Combat Simulation, Level Black. Each cadet flew a live combat aircraft in a tactical ambush scenario simulation, but this time it wasn't a game. The planes were real, the speed was real, the G-force was real. Everything felt like a battlefield except the bullets. Megan Reese was assigned F-16 tail number D-12. An older but stable aircraft, the kind given to cadets the board didn't want to risk much on. And even with her Alpha Tier evaluation in simulation, Megan's name remained controversial. Right before takeoff, a male cadet passed by with a smirk. "There's no restart button this time. Careful up there, Reese." She didn't reply. She simply stepped up and slid her father's insignia, Colonel Robert Reese, into her left thigh pocket. Her father never got to fly one last time. She would do it for him. And more. 09:31. Takeoff. Megan pulled the throttle. The engine roared, her back pressed into the seat. She climbed per instruction, but just as she entered the combat zone, a sudden emergency struck. F-16 D-17 has lost control. Emergency electronic failure. Pilot requesting immediate assistance. Megan glanced at the radar. D-17 was Henderson. His aircraft began tilting left, unresponsive to controls. Command Center relayed F-12. "Maintain your flight path. Stay clear of D-17. We'll handle it." But Megan didn't respond. She descended, banked, headed straight toward the failing aircraft. A 9:37 D-17 spiraled sharply, diving toward a simulated ridge, less than 60 seconds from impact. "Reese, what are you doing?" "The order is to exit the zone. I don't leave anyone behind. Not today." Megan activated the emergency navigation protocol. She maneuvered to D-17's left flank within 90 feet. She opened a backup channel. "Kyle, can you hear me? I'm on your left. Don't move. I'm stabilizing your pitch using pulse sync." No one had ever tried this maneuver in a live training mission. She knew that if she was off by even a degree, both jets would crash. Megan dialed her speed to surgical precision. She transmitted a simulated pulse lock, aligning both aircraft into a synced roll, buying enough time for command to re-establish remote control. 09:38. D-17 stopped falling, stabilized, returned to safe flight path. The entire academy fell silent. For the first time in Phantom 9's history, a cadet had saved another aircraft in live maneuver conditions without breaking a single safety protocol. She returned to her flight path, finished the simulation mission with one hand slightly trembling, not from fear, but because for the first time, she had truly altered someone's fate. 10:02, she landed. Radar log recorded mission completion. 100% target recovery. Confirmed. Tactical reflex evaluation exceptional. As she stepped out of the cockpit, Lieutenant Colonel Harris didn't wait for her. He walked straight over, eyes fixed on her, then asked, "You know you could be disciplined for disobeying orders, right?" Megan nodded calmly. "I do. But I also know what honor means." He didn't reply, just turned away quietly, but his voice rang across the field. "Next time I'm putting her in charge of tactical planning." And just like that, Megan was no longer the female cadet. She was a certified pilot, the first in 12 years to be recorded on the Strategic Counter-Initiative Training List reserved for those capable of breaking patterns, to save the entire system. They look to the skies in search of heroes, but sometimes the very person they once stepped over is already flying above them. Day 85, Langley Air Force Base, Virginia. Banners stretched from the entrance gates to the control tower. Beneath them, a line of high-ranking officers, defense delegates, and military contractors crowded the VIP stands. Media crews were in position. Helicopter cams from NBC and CNN hovered ready. "We are about to witness the first live combat maneuver demonstration by the new generation of pilots represented by Cadet Megan Reese." The flight was named Phantom Ghost Loop, a complex series of aerial maneuvers, including inverted rolls, high-speed angle banks radar counter-response, and a manual landing with no navigation computer, moves previously only executed by veteran Thunderbird pilots. Megan was granted control of an F-22 Raptor callsign Wolf 07, one of the most advanced fighter jets in existence, never been flown by a cadet in a public demonstration. She didn't ask for it. They gave it to her, not to honor her, but to test her limits. A voice backstage, not even whispering, said, "If she fails in front of the cameras, every word of praise she's gotten will go up in smoke." She heard it, but like always, Megan remained silent. 10:00 a.m. The control tower gave the order, "Take off." The F-22 engine screamed to life. The ground trembled slightly. The Raptor shot into the sky like a bolt of lightning. On the giant screens, millions of live viewers watched, some with skepticism, some breathless, some eager, all waiting for her to stumble. Phase 1. Phantom Rise. She ascended to 15,000 feet, disengaged the guidance radar, and flew entirely by instinct and relative velocity. A move even seasoned pilots hesitated to attempt. Pitch angle. Accurate to 0.3 degrees, one commander gasped. Phase 2. The Ghost Loop. She spiraled through a twin loop in a reverse figure 8, executing a maneuver that once nearly fractured the spine of a Thunderbird veteran. The entire crowd stood. The screen flashed perfect flight. As the jet completed its final turn, preparing for landing, the entire grandstand fell silent. Lieutenant Colonel Harris stepped up to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, you are witnessing the most precise tactical flight ever performed by a cadet in the 30-year history of the Phantom 9 program. And the one flying it?" He turned to face the big screen. "Ball is the daughter of the late Colonel Robert Reese, a legendary fighter pilot of the Pacific Air Force, reported missing in the Raven Sand operation of 2002. The grandstand erupted. CNN cut into their broadcast for a breaking announcement. The hashtags "Future Ghost Pilot" and "Daughter of Legend" exploded across social media. But Megan quietly brought the aircraft down. The moment her wheels touched the ground, she powered off the engine and opened the cockpit. Her eyes searched for no one except the farthest row of seats, where a single empty chair held a faded flight helmet marked Reese, Command. She stepped down. The entire field roared to life. The crowd no longer saw a female cadet. They saw someone who carried a legacy not by name, but by her own wings. They laughed when I enlisted. They went silent when I took off. And today, they stood when I landed. Victory doesn't always come from taking off. Sometimes it begins with the courage to land exactly where it matters. 3 days after the flight demonstration, Megan Reese's name had spread across national media. NBC sent an invitation for an interview. The Pentagon requested her presence at the annual Combat Pilot Symposium. The Phantom 9 training school hung her portrait in the main hall, the only photo ever placed there of a cadet who hadn't yet graduated. She said nothing to the press. She kept walking as usual, training at 4:30 a.m., quietly taking her seat at the back of the classroom. But inside, her everything had started to collapse. On Wednesday night, an unmarked envelope appeared in her locker. Inside was a copy of a classified file, Operation Raven Sand, 2002. The final signature on the order to cancel combat support for Colonel Robert Reese was General Clive Hamilton, the current commander of Western Tactical Air Command, the same man who had just extended a direct recruitment offer to Megan. The file was clear. Reese requested backup after detecting interference in his navigation system. Command declined, citing pilot lacks authority to evaluate risk. The aircraft lost signal after 7 minutes. No immediate search was launched. The last page bore a handwritten note scribbled in blue ink. We cannot allow an outlier officer to threaten the current command structure. Megan sat frozen in the old flight gear storage room. In her hand was the death order copy, and her father's faded insignia, the only memory she had ever carried. He didn't die from a missile. He died from being left behind. The next day, she was summoned to a private meeting with General Hamilton. The room was cold, walls lined with glory portraits, fluorescent lights pierced directly across the table. "Cadet Reese," he said, "we're offering you a special assignment in the F-35C test unit. This is the highest position ever offered to an ungraduated cadet. You'll be paid 5 times the standard officer's salary. And of course, your family record will remain sealed permanently." Megan wasn't surprised. She asked one question. "And if I refuse, you're free to choose. But remember, the sky is vast, but the human heart can be narrow." Not everyone is ready to hear the name Reese again. That night, she opened her father's old flight log, the pilot journal her mother had kept since 2002. The last page contained a single line written before his final mission. "If you're reading this, it means I didn't make it back. Live to prove that honor doesn't need to be hidden." The next day at the Andrews base, during the young pilot commendation ceremony, where Megan was about to receive the prestigious Falcon Gold Medal, she stepped onto the podium. Cameras streamed live nationwide. Everyone expected a short, polished, safe speech, but she pulled out a copy of the Raven Sand file. "Before you hand me any medal, I need to make one thing clear. I am not standing here because I'm better than anyone else. I'm standing here because I survived a truth that's been buried for 20 years. She opened the file and read every sentence aloud. She named those who had signed off on the denied backup, the authors of the death order. She spoke of her father, abandoned in a war zone, not because of failure, but because he didn't fit the system. The room was stunned. The medal bearer froze in place. General Hamilton left his seat, pale. "If I must choose between accepting a medal and preserving the dignity of someone who's gone, I choose honor. And if the system can't withstand the truth, then it should begin changing, starting today." She didn't take the medal. She didn't bow. She didn't smile. She left the stage in silence. But no one dared look away anymore. She didn't need a statue built in her name. She just needed the next generation not to step in the same mud she did. After the ceremony, the Falcon Gold Medal was rescinded. General Hamilton resigned. A congressional investigation was reopened into Operation Sand Raven. 3 senior officers were placed on administrative suspension, and for the first time, the name of Colonel Robert Reese was engraved on the missing airman memorial, not as a technical incident, but as lost due to denied support by command. Megan did not grant a single interview. She turned down every corporate offer to become the face of their campaigns. For 2 months, no one knew where she was until a photo surfaced online. An old hangar rooftop in Arizona had been converted into a flight training site. A rusted iron sign hung above the door with hand-scratched letters, "Reclaim, Flight Academy for the Grounded, by one who rose. Reclaim a flight academy built for those disqualified by the system for being unfit, those judged by gender, those with the wrong last name, those rejected for not being a team player, and those who had fallen but never quit." On the first day of class, she stood before a group of 12. None of them stood out. A girl who used to be a mechanic, a soldier recovering from a minor injury, a cadet of color whose application had been withdrawn. She gave no speech. She simply handed each of them a piece of paper, a copy of the hand-drawn flight map she once sketched in her flight suit pocket. On it was written, "You weren't broken. You were just too much sky for their hangars." 5 years later, Reclaim became the most successful private aviation program in the Western region. 50% of its cadets were women. 40% had been rejected from traditional military units. There were no medals on the wall, no halls of fame, only flight suits, worn thin flight paths, carved straight, and people who held the stick steady long after others had stopped believing in them. Megan never performed another public flight. She turned down every invitation to fly the F-35. She chose a quiet life, but she was never forgotten. One winter day at Arlington National Cemetery, she stood before her father's stone, now etched with his name, folded flag, and a medal beneath. She placed her hand on the stone and whispered, "You didn't come home, but you flew with me through every part of this journey." A young female cadet approached her shoulder and asked quietly, "Miss Reese, next year I'll be applying for the Tactical Control Program. Do you think I'm ready?" Megan turned to her. Her eyes no longer held anger, no longer held doubt, only a quiet kind of faith. If you have to ask that question, it means you already are. Sometimes the ones denied the sky are the ones meant to redefine it. Before Megan Reese became the symbol who changed an entire system, before she flew an F-22 under hundreds of doubting eyes and made an entire base rise to their feet, she was just a 10-year-old girl standing on the roof every night waiting for her father to come home from a missing aircraft. 6 days in silence. 6 days without answers. And then, a miracle. Her father survived and returned from the dead zone. But what that left in Megan's heart was a vow never spoken aloud. If she ever touched a cockpit, then every single flight she took would be to protect other children from ever living with the fear she once did. And it was from that scar, that silent memory, that Megan Reese flew. Not to be seen, but so that no one else would be left behind. Megan Reese once thought losing a father to the sky was the worst thing that could happen. But worse than that was not knowing if he was even alive. Virginia, the year Megan turned 10. That night, cold rain fell not heavy, but long enough that the tin roof of her house began to shiver in rhythm. Her father, Colonel Robert Reese, was out on a routine training mission with his F-16 fighter jet. Before leaving, he'd said, "I'll be back before you finish your math homework. Remember 3 problems on drag force, 3 on gravity." She laughed and drew a chalk airplane on the kitchen table like she always did. Not once had one of his flights failed to return, until that night, when the phone rang at 2:37 a.m. Her mother, Ellen, stepped out of the bedroom, in her robe, face pale, as if she already knew the world had just collapsed even before hearing the full sentence. "We regret to inform you, aircraft Bravo 10, piloted by Colonel Robert Reese, has lost contact over the Raven Sand sector. It's past the recovery perimeter. No trace has been found." There was no screaming, no fainting, just the sound of a dish shattering in the kitchen because Ellen could no longer hold anything steady, and Megan stood by the stair rail gripping the wood. She didn't understand every word, but she understood one thing very clearly. Her father, her hero, might never come home again. The next morning, everything went on as if normal. Her mother still made coffee. Megan still went to school. But in their eyes, sound itself seemed to have vanished. No more radio, no more sound of her father's car pulling into the garage. No more warm hugs at 5:30 a.m. like always. Just one sentence, her mother whispered while brushing her hair. "You must not cry. If you cry, he won't be able to find his way home." Megan didn't cry, but she began doing something else. That night, She climbed onto the roof. She brought her father's old radio transmitter, a peeling pair of binoculars, and a folded terrain map of the flight zone he often flew through. If the sky took my father, then I will find him. I'll tell him, don't go deeper. I'm waiting. She stayed there for 6 nights straight, beneath a damp roof, in the kind of cold that numbed her fingers, but her eyes never left the sky. Not to look for airplanes, but to make sure she didn't miss a single sign that her father might still be alive. There are sorrows that make no sound. They simply cling to every day, every minute, every breath. On the first day after the call, the Reese family's small home turned into a temporary base of silence. Megan still went to school, still nodded at her teacher, still sat doing drag force equations like her father had asked. But when she held her pencil, her hand didn't write. She only drew small airplanes flying in formation, circling a red dot on the paper. She wrote, "Dad, I'm tracing your path." On the second day, the news reported fighter jet missing over Raven Sand Desert. Survival chances are low. Kids at school whispered during lunch. One said, "That Reese girl. She's his daughter." She didn't react. She just bit into the sandwich her mother had packed, wrapped in yesterday's newspaper, and whispered, "Mom doesn't need to know I heard." On the third day, Megan began writing letters. None of them were sent. Just 43 short notes scribbled on homework sheets, napkins, and textbook margins. She stuffed them into an old cookie tin beneath her pillow. "Is it cold where you are, Dad? I left your jacket on the sofa. Today, I drew another map. The west side looks easier to fly through. If you can hear me, blink your light like you did on my last birthday." On the fourth day, her mother returned from the laundromat, exhausted but forcing a smile. "Megan, let's still listen to the radio tonight. Your dad always picked channel 101.3, remember?" Megan nodded. They sat close together, under a worn-out yellow lamp, like 2 light bulbs, waiting for a lightning strike. Neither said it out loud, but both feared tomorrow someone might arrive and say, "We found wreckage." On the 5th day, the house grew colder. Not because of the weather, but because doubt had begun to seep in through the cracks. Her mother quietly took down the wedding photo hanging by the window, not to hide it, but as if to protect it from being accused of hoping too much. Megan saw, but didn't ask. She did only one thing. She went into the shed and pulled out the old metal chair her father used when sketching flight routes. She sat on it spine straight, pretending to hold the control stick, and whispered, "Dad, I haven't learned how to fly yet, but I'll keep this seat for you. When you come home, I'll give it back." On the 6th day, the phone stopped ringing. People around them began to move on. The neighbors no longer avoided eye contact. They started asking, "Have you thought about holding a memorial service?" Megan's mother didn't respond. She only turned to her daughter and asked, "Do you still believe?" Megan looked straight into her mother's eyes, without tears, without wavering. "Dad promised he wouldn't be long, and he's never broken a promise, right, Mum?" 6 days, no radar, no signal, no black box, no debris. Only a single lamp was left on in the living room all night, and a 10-year-old girl writing one final line into letter number 44. "If you can hear me, Dad, I'm still waiting. I won't leave the rooftop, because this time I want to be the first one to see you coming home." He didn't fall from the sky. He walked out of the fire, because someone was still waiting for him to breathe again. Morning of the 7th day. The Reese family's house still had its door slightly open, just like it had for 6 days. The living room lamp was still lit, though dim and tired. The radio still played the same recycled headlines, news, weather, disappointment, in numbers. Megan climbed onto the rooftop again as always. She held letter number 45 in her hand. Her eyes still never left the sky. What she didn't know was that 14 miles away, a rescue helicopter had just landed on a dusty red plane. The hatch flung open. A man jumped down, limping shoulder, hastily bandaged face, smeared with mud and soot, but alive, still alive. It was him, Robert Reese. Not a confirmed loss, not a fallen hero unrecovered, but him, in flesh, in blood, in will, and in the belief that someone out there was still waiting. She didn't see him right away, not until her mother screamed from the kitchen, "Megan, get down, sweetheart." She slipped off the roof, nearly falling, bolted through the door, and froze. 5 meters away stood a man with no crisp uniform, no shining epaulets, no firm stride of a commanding officer. Only a frame, trembling with pain, but eyes blazing as if he had just fought death itself and refused to lose. He dropped to his knees without a word, and she, Megan Reese, the girl who had written 44 letters into the void, ran straight into his arms. There were no tears, only the sound of heartbeats, 3 in sync. "I waited for you. I know. That's why I couldn't die." Her mother collapsed beside the porch. She had held herself together for 6 days. No complaints, no collapse, no crying. Until now, when she saw her husband home, she finally let herself shake. You know, one more night, and she might have stopped believing in the sky. Robert held her hand. His eyes were still clouded with smoke, but his voice rang clear like the day he made his oath as an officer. "I was left behind, denied support, buried alive beneath a broken aircraft. But every time I woke up, I thought only one thing. Megan must not grow up with a name carved in stone. She needs her father." And so, I crawled out of the fire. He survived with a hand-drawn map, with a broken water pipe inside the cockpit, with his daughter's laughter echoing in his mind each time he faded in and out of consciousness. He didn't ask for honors. He didn't demand justice. He didn't want a military salute. He wanted one thing only: to come home and see his daughter again. Megan doesn't remember exactly how that night ended. She only remembers falling asleep in her father's arms. And when she woke up, the sun was rising, and her father, still smelling of ash, was sitting by the window, cleaning the old broadcast radio. As long as this radio still works, there's still hope. And if one day you decide to fly, fly in a way that no child ever has to wait the way you did. Home isn't the safest place. It's the place where you're allowed to fall, and someone will lift you up with the same hands that once trembled at the thought of losing you. After his return, Robert Reese was no longer the highest-ranking pilot in the region. He was no longer listed in tactical briefings or military instruction manuals. Instead, he became the most ordinary man in a small town, but also the most extraordinary father to Megan. He didn't talk much about the accident anymore, not because he was avoiding it, but because he wanted what remained in the house to be defined not by the legacy of pain, but by the value of continuing life. There are survivors who come home only to become ghosts. But I came back to teach you how to fly, not to tell stories of falling. Each evening, after Megan's mother returned home from the laundromat, still in her uniform, the three of them would sit at the wooden table and open up the old airspace map. Robert would point at thick black markings. "This is where the crosswinds push hard. Here the radar usually drops a signal. And this is where I was left behind." Megan would quietly copy down every symbol, every number, using the same pencil her father once used in the military. She was only 11 years old, but her mind processed like that of a tactical officer. Her mother, Ellen, never once held a flight stick, but she was the one who kept the roof from collapsing. She cooked with an old electric stove, mended their uniforms, and never let anyone in that house sleep with an empty stomach or a heavy heart. You teach her to fly. I'll make sure she always has a place to land. None of the three was perfect, and because of that, they became an unshakable flight crew. Megan started drawing flight maps by hand. What began with shaky lines grew sharp with precision. While other kids her age colored princesses, she shaded in pressure checkpoints. She calculated wind arcs, escape velocities, and timing for simulated roll maneuvers. At the bottom of every map, she wrote the same line, "For the next one, so they don't get left behind like my dad." Her father, the man who once crawled out of fire, was now the one who lit the first flame in his daughter's heart. Her mother woman, who carried every bill and every weight, was the wind that kept that flame alive. And Megan, once a little girl frozen at the doorway when the bad news came, was now learning to take the stick, not to rebel, but to rewrite justice in the sky. Every medal gleams on camera, but no one sees the hands scraped raw in the dark, just to reach it. At age 13, Megan Reese lived in a town with no flight academies, no advanced STEM programs. No one believed a girl could become a pilot, especially one whose family survived on government support and ran a laundromat. But Megan didn't ask for recognition. She asked for a wooden chair, an old monitor, and her father's flight maps drawn on wax paper. In the backyard's broken-down shed, she built her first simulated cockpit seat, a discarded kitchen chair, joystick, a bent metal rod from the auto repair shop, monitor, a 14-inch CRT, powered by a salvage generator her father rewired, sound, a radio headset with static just enough for her to imagine the engine noise. She didn't fly, but she learned to control air through memory and reflex. Every night, after her mother had gone to bed and her father's back ached from teaching night classes, Megan slipped into the shed, shut the door, switched on. The dim yellow bulb unfolded the map and took off inside her mind. She imagined each radar point, each wave of turbulence, each system warning, each reverse loop maneuver, and above all the moment when a plane stopped responding. Because Dad survived that place. So I have to learn to save someone else before they fall. While other kids learned to connect to social networks, Megan learned to map wind spirals and analyze jet pulse rhythms. While girls her age decorated notebooks with stickers, she used hers to rewrite the entire F-16 dashboard from memory, just as her father had described it. Once a teacher asked Megan, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" She didn't say pilot. She simply replied, "I want to be the reason someone makes it home." She didn't win a scholarship right away. No unit picked her file first. There was no bonus point for training in a shed using paper maps. But at 17, she submitted her application to Phantom 9, the most rigorous flight training program in the country, along with a 3-page handwritten letter ending with a single line in slanted purple ink, "I don't need to be chosen because of my gender or for having an exceptional record. I only ask for one chance to prove a girl who trained in the dark can still bring others back to the light. Some come here to learn how to fly, but she came to keep a promise that had lived for half a lifetime." First day at Phantom 9 Academy. Runway temperature 41 degrees Celsius. The sky was cloudless. The air was thick with the scent of fuel-hot metal and the quiet ache of not belonging that crept into the hearts of many new cadets. Megan Reese, 18 years old, walked through the gates in a dark uniform her mother had ironed 3 times, carrying an old backpack and her father's silver insignia tucked into her chest pocket. No one knew her name. No one cared where she came from. And no one certainly believed that a small girl with a neat ponytail and a face untouched by drills could ever grip the stick of an F-16. "Welcome briefing for new cadets," the training officer said bluntly. "This place isn't for the soft-hearted. The sky doesn't show mercy to anyone, least of all those who think they're special. If you're here to prove something, do it with sweat, not with your family stories." Megan didn't react. She lowered her head, but her gaze didn't waver, because she knew if anything had brought her here, it wasn't to prove a point. It was to keep a vow. On her first night in the dorms, while other cadets lay collapsed from the physical trial that opened the program, Megan sat quietly writing the first entry in her flight journal, even though she had never flown. Winds level 2, no clouds, expected ceiling 2 to 500 feet. If I could fly today, I'd point the nose north toward the place where my father once disappeared. Not to find him again, but to forgive the fear that kept me silent all these years. I'm flying, Dad, with my feet and with my heart. On the third day, she woke earlier than everyone else, 4 a.m., and stepped onto the training field. No one was there, only the sleeping jets, the quiet runway lights, and the wind whispering gently against metal hulls. Megan walked toward an F-16 at the far end. She didn't open it. She just placed her hand on the dull, gray paint, eyes closed. Her breathing slowed, as if she were listening for the metal heart inside to beat in rhythm with her own. Back then, I stood beneath this sky for 6 nights, waiting for Dad to come home. Today, I stand before it, to become the reason someone else makes it back sooner. In her first training week, Megan didn't stand out. She wasn't the strongest, she wasn't the fastest, but she was the only one who never made a single mistake in the simulation. The only one who stayed behind after each session was to clean the simulator room. The only one who asked to wipe down the dashboard by hand instead of using the automated system. She didn't do it to impress. She did it out of respect for every bolt, every button. Just as her father had once said, any detail might be the reason someone survives or doesn't. In the second week, an officer asked, "Why are you here, Reese? Who inspired you?" Megan didn't hesitate. "My father, who survived 6 days, abandoned in a dead zone, not because of luck, but because of a map he drew himself. And my mother, who was the spine of our entire family, even though she never once left the ground." The officer was silent for a few seconds, then nodded and said nothing more. But that night, Megan received access to the Advanced Simulation Wing, a privilege rarely granted before the 3rd month of training. When they can't cut your wings, they'll try to dim your vision. But you only fall when you start looking down. Week 4 at Phantom 9. First group tactical exercise. Megan was paired with 3 male cadets, all sons of senior officers. During their first team meeting, one of them tossed the mission map onto the table and said with a smirk, "Reese, want to redraw the dead zone your dad got left in? Might come in handy." No one laughed out loud, but there were a few throat clears, some stifled chuckles, and one smug glance. Megan didn't respond. She calmly picked up the map, quietly corrected a mismarked altitude, then slid it back across the table. "The radar convergence here is off by 800 feet. If you don't adjust your turn angle, will be detected in under 3 minutes." There was no need to raise her voice. Precision was its own response. But silence didn't make the bias disappear. One evening, she found her simulator seat had been tampered with. When she launched the training module, all radar and wind resistance data had been scrambled. She failed the simulation for the first time. The instructor looked at her file in hand, eyes uncertain. "That's strange. You never miss. Do you want to explain?" Megan looked straight at him. "I won't explain. I only ask for one more try. If I fail again, cut me." That night, she returned to the simulator, after hours requesting the last 15 minutes of access. No one stayed, no one watched, just one figure hair tied back sitting upright beneath the red glow of the training cockpit. She reran the same exercise. This time, no mistakes, not even a second of delay, and she discovered a new evasive maneuver that no one else in the class had considered. The next morning, the instructor checked the system history and recorded her tactic as an alpha-grade rapid counter-navigation response. None of her victories brought applause, only silence and wary glances. After she passed the high-pressure reflex drill, two cadets seated behind her spoke just loud enough for her to hear. Maybe they're just pushing a few more girls through the pipeline for PR. She didn't argue. She didn't need to, because she knew when a girl exceeds expectations, people call it luck. Only one person always knew the truth, her mother. Every night she still called and asked, "How was your flight today? Sweetheart, were you scared?" Megan answered softly, "Yes, but I'm more afraid of not trying hard enough than I am of what people think." Her mother laughed gently. "That's right, because they can try to clip your wings, but no one can ever turn off the compass in your heart." One late afternoon, her tactical instructor called her into the office. No grade sheet, no warnings, just a form, a nomination to join the national-level experimental flight program, which meant she would be flying a real F-22 in front of the entire senior command during a public live training event. A privilege never granted to a first-year cadet. The instructor looked at her, his voice calm and steady. "I didn't pick you out of sympathy. I picked you, because no one in this class flies better than you." Megan looked down at the insignia, still pinned inside her chest pocket, touched it gently, said nothing, then raised her head. "I won't let you down. Neither of the men in my life ever gave up. I won't be the first." She didn't fly to be seen. She flew so others could come home. Public flight demonstration at Andrews Air Force Base. An annual event broadcast live nationwide. Generals, military contractors, media, congressional representatives, everyone was there. The opening sequence was a real-time tactical combat simulation using the F-22 Raptor, an aircraft reserved for official pilots or senior officers only. And today, a first-year cadet had been chosen to fly. Her name, Megan Reese. Before stepping into the aircraft, she called home. Her mother answered her voice as gentle as always. "Are you scared?" "Yes, but not because I can't fly. I'm scared that if I do well, you might cry again." Her mother laughed softly. "If I cry this time, it's because I'm proud. Go fly." She carried in her chest pocket the silver insignia, now dulled by time, that once belonged to her father. Inside the cockpit, she taped a small note. "Letter number 45, Dad, I'm flying now. No more waiting. Now I'm the one helping others to wait for." The flight began. She launched the F-22 in a vertical takeoff, spiraled past radar, looped into an inverted figure eight, and simulated multi-angle pursuit scenarios. Every motion was flawless. No drift, no turbulence, not a single deviation. Officers nodded. The media couldn't look away. One commander whispered, "This is battlefield-level reflex control, not something a cadet should be capable of." But more important than the flight was the landing. The F-22 touched down as smoothly as water meeting sand. She removed her helmet, stepped out into the sunlight, the wind, and a wave of relentless applause. Megan walked to the microphone at the front of the tarmac. Her voice was calm and clear. "I didn't fly to prove what a girl can do. I flew to say this. Every time a soldier doesn't come home, a family waits in silence. I was once that child, and today I choose to live, so that other children won't have to write 44 letters in the dark. After the demonstration, she returned to her hometown, not to rest, but to do something greater. She founded Reclaim Flight Academy. At the first opening session, there was only a small room and 9 cadets, none of whom met the traditional standards. A girl who had been denied a scholarship, a boy whose mother worked as a janitor. Someone was struck from the selection for being unsuited to military culture. And standing before them was Megan Reese. No medals on her chest, no grand titles, only a fire in her eyes, the same that had burned the day her father returned. I don't need you to fly perfectly. I need you to fly with purpose. Her father, Robert Reese, was now retired, but he was the one repairing each simulator, designing the very first training modules for the cadets. Her mother, Ellen, ran the kitchen, cleaned the floors, and kept records quietly, just as she had done when holding the family together. And Megan, the girl who once wrote letters waiting for her father, now writes flight orders for a new generation. No longer afraid of being rejected, no longer chasing recognition. She needs only one thing to fly, so that no one is ever left behind again. Megan Reese's story didn't begin with glory. It began on a cold, rainy night, with a phone call at 2 a.m. and a 10-year-old girl sitting on a rooftop writing 44 letters just to hold on to the hope that her father would return. But that moment of near despair became the fire that shaped one of the strongest pilots the sky has ever known. Megan didn't fly for applause. She flew to keep a promise to the father who had once been left behind, to the mother who carried the family in silence, and to the child within her who once feared no one would ever come back. From a little girl training in the dark with only her father's memories and her mother's hands, Megan became the light that guides those who were once rejected. The lesson here is not about spectacular victories or shining medals. It's about resolve, that if you know what you're flying for, no one can make you fall. Personally, I believe that within each of us is a promise unspoken, either to ourselves or to someone we've lost. And only when we live true to that promise do we truly take flight. If this story moved you, share with us. What promise have you held in your heart? And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Toch Story so you won't miss more powerful journeys like this one. Because sometimes a survivor isn't a miracle. They're living proof that you too can do what no one ever believed was possible.